He's also threatening 50% tariffs on the EU as talks have hit a wall. All right. Make sure y'all hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. Let me go ahead and share some of this, and then we're going to deep dive into tariffs for 10 minutes. All right. Let's get to it, y'all.
News is going to move markets too in a significant way. Breaking news on the push for U.S. trade deals. President Trump says that talks with the European Union are hitting a brick wall and is now looking to take action. He said this about an hour ago, quote, "Our discussions with them are going nowhere. Therefore, I am recommending a straight 50% tariff on the European Union starting on June 1, 2025. That's about 9 days from now. There is no tariff if the product is built or manufactured in the United States." And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent here exclusively. And good morning to you, Mr. Secretary. And thanks for being here.
Morning, Bill.
On what has turned out to be a rather busy news day. And good morning to you. You were just in Canada the last few days meeting with members of the G7, the EU, and I want to get into all of that. But with regard to this move on the EU, how bad was the conversation in Canada to lead to this?
Well, the conversation in Canada was fine. The problem is the lead up to that. The 90-day pause on the April 2nd tariffs was based on countries or trade blocs coming to us and negotiating in good faith. And I believe the president believes that the EU proposals have not been of the same quality that we've seen from our other important trading partners. I've said there are 18 important trade deals that we have to do. I'm working mostly on Asia, and that group has move forward with some very interesting proposals. They're negotiating in good faith. We've already inked a deal with the UK. I think there are a couple more coming in the near future. So I think this is in response just to the EU's pace.
Let me get back to that in a moment. I mentioned June.
All right, so let's revisit the conversation. This is one of the reasons why you want to make sure that you're tuning into the Millionaire Morning Show every single day. If you miss a day, you then miss some insight. Shout out to Sean and the one. I'm going to read that super chat shortly. All right. This is the reason why if you miss a day, then you're going to be behind. All right. So I'm going to do a little bit of a recap. What did I say was important for them to get done first? Was the UK, right? Why was it important for them to get the UK on board first? Well, the reason that it was okay for them to get the UK on board first is because, and Asian countries, was because it was going to serve as a waterfall agreement for setting up all of the rest of the things that every other country had to do in order to comply with the United States of America. You want to negotiate your strongest and your best deal with the people that are the most compliant, and that is the United Kingdom. Well, how does that then affect other conversations? It's the same way that happens when it comes to the UAW, Unifor, Teamsters, and how they negotiate with different industries or people within the industry. For example, the big three, and this has been a negotiating tactic since the beginning of time. All right. They start off with the strongest partner that could be hurt the most, but absolutely have to do a deal. And then that serves as the framework for other automakers when it comes to negotiating the best deal, as far as making sure that the union get their raises, their benefits, the pensions, whatever healthcare coverage, whatever that looks like, right? They usually start off with Ford or GM. That serves as the framework to then do a deal with Ford, whoever it was, Ford next, and then Chrysler. And then often at times a UAW or Uniform, they mimic whatever that contract is. Unifor is the union over in Canada. They mimic whatever that contract is so that they can make sure that they're using that as leverage to say, hey, listen, we did a deal with them. They about to start back opening. You really want to make sure that you rock out with us. Often at times what the companies will do is, even though they're competitors, so Ford may be a competitor to General Motors. General Motors may obviously be a competitor to Chrysler. They're working together. So the leadership of those companies know that they have negotiations coming up with the UAW, and all their contracts expire at the same time. So they all work together. They make sure that they take out a line of credit so that they can sustain themselves through union negotiations. They knew that Biden was going to get out there and be propped up as an organizational, as a figurehead so that he could try to get the endorsement of the UAW, so on and so forth. I will also go further and tell you that it doesn't just serve as a waterfall agreement for the big three. It serves as a waterfall agreement for other industries, and it serves as a waterfall agreement for suppliers. The UAW also organized suppliers, people that contribute into the UAW that makes parts. They also organize steel manufacturing and so on and so forth. That's why when they then negotiated their deal with the big three as a part of Local 600, so Local 600 is a UAW local that then serves to unionize in a specific industry or a specific city or a specific facility. The deal that they did with Ford Motor Company then affected the deal that they did with the steel manufacturer that obviously was Ford Steel, which changed into Rouge Steel, which changed into Severstal and all of that. But the local steel, it then affected everything. I mean, all the way down to the facilities that we can use, the workout facilities, all of that stuff. So they always want to tackle the biggest deal first and then start to have that waterfall over. And then once they get that deal, they also have leverage over that person to say, well, listen, if you don't do business with us, then we're going to do this, and we're going to have a conversation with our friends over here that we just did a deal with, and we're going to prevent them from being able to do business with you also. It's all interconnected. So that's why when Scott Bessent is over here and he's talking to you about the trade deal with the EU and they saying that it's not going anywhere, well, the EU, I'm sure they proposed some changes and they proposed some updates, but they didn't know that they had a deal over here. And so the United States of America is going to compare it with what it is that they got over here, because they're not going to give you a break when they done already got their strongest partnerships together. Why would they give you a break? And the people that's complying and doing business with them, who's benefiting also, they're going to be like, hey, wait a minute. How come they get a better deal than we did? So now you're going to be the last man standing, and this is what's happening with the UK. I'm sorry, the EU.
And first is 9 days away. Is there an opportunity for negotiations in these 9 days?
Well, I'm not going to negotiate on TV, but I would hope that this would light a fire under the EU, because, Bill, I've said before, EU has a collective action problem here. It's 27 countries, but they're being represented by the one group in Brussels. So some of the feedback that I've been getting is that the underlying countries don't even know what the EU is negotiating on their behalf.
On Apple, there is more news too on that. Okay, here we go. On True Social an hour ago, I've long informed Tim Cook of Apple that I expect their iPhones will be sold in the United States of America, will be manufactured and built in the U.S., not India.
Myron, UAW stands for United Auto Workers. Stands for the United Auto Workers. All right, so it's an automotive union, but they also represent different industries like steel.
Or any place else. If that's not the case, a tariff of at least 25% must be paid by Apple to the United States. So we've got two tariff threats in about 10 minutes' time. I understand that Tim Cook was at the White House this week. Did that conversation not go well?
Again, I wasn't in on that conversation. I also saw Tim this week. So, again, the president is trying to bring back precision manufacturing to the U.S. And, I think that one of our greatest vulnerabilities, are this external production, especially in semiconductors, and a large part of Apple's components are in semiconductors. So we would like to have Apple help us make the semiconductor supply chain more secure.
What I found interesting in Saudi Arabia last week was that the president called out Tim Cook for not being there. Now, you know that high technology companies, it takes time to move those production facilities. What's realistic for Apple?
Again, I don't know from company to company, so we'll have to see. I do think that Apple started moving a big portion of their supply chain out of China during COVID, when China proved to be, an unreliable partner.
Yeah, they moved it over to India. That's why they started fostering better relations with India. And a few other countries outside of that, but they were fostering better relationships with India.
Okay, so we'll see where that goes, and waiting a reply perhaps from Tim Cook, and maybe that comes today. On the big, beautiful bill, it passed in the House, but it only passed by a single vote. And some suggest that now's the hard part. Here's Senator Ron Johnson out of Wisconsin on what's expected next on the Senate side.
I've already said it, in its current state is completely unacceptable to me. What was not even brought up in the House debate are the numbers we ought to be considering.
The president said that he wants this passed ASAP. Are you worried that he's going to be upset at the Senate? Yeah.
I couldn't care less if he's upset. I'm concerned about my children, my grandchildren, and the fact that we are stealing from them.
As you listen to that, it's going to be a battle. How much change can the president accept on the Senate revision?
Well, I think we're going to see. The House had been working on their bill for a year, and I know the Senate, led by Leader Thune, is going to take this up.
Somebody said Tim Cook is going to be out of Apple soon. Well, eventually they all retire. But here's the thing. Why is it in Tim Cook's best interest to make sure that he negotiate effectively with the United States of America? Because Tim Cook doesn't have just a regular job. You got to remember that Tim Cook's compensation, and the reason why these CEOs and these executives make so much money, is not based off of whatever their base pay is or what they get paid out in as far as cash. It's not it. It's based off of the equity that they have inside of the company. They often at times get stock options. That's a part of their compensation that they cannot sell for an extended period of time. What does that do? It makes sure that they're doing the things that's in the best interest of the company long term, because you are going to be affected by whatever the fortunes are of Apple. So Tim Cook eventually leaving Apple doesn't matter. Do you know why Steve Ballmer is considered the best CEO, or not the best CEO, the best sports owner in all of basketball? The reason that Steve Ballmer is considered the best CEO in all of basketball is because Steve Ballmer's net worth continues to balloon with the success of Microsoft even after he left the company. That's why. It's because he had the capacity to spend on whatever it is. That's why he built the whole arena with his own money. He built the whole arena with his own money because he has the ability to do so, because his Microsoft stock and his interest is largely still tied to the success of the company. And that's why they want you to do the thing that's in the best interest of the company long term. That's why your compensation is set up the way that it's set up. You are long going to be impacted by the decisions that you make on the behalf of the company forever, as long as you live. Bill Gates still holds a huge percentage in Microsoft. He still holds a huge percentage in Microsoft. That's how he's able to fund the majority of his other initiatives, because he still gets a lot of money from Microsoft. You see what I'm saying?